Hi students, let's review question game project worksheet 3. Exercise 1. Here's some Python code that's not particularly formatted well. I would normally put more blank lines in here to increase the readability. However, I wanted to fit 4 exercises on one piece of paper here for this worksheet, so it's a little crammed. Anyway, you'll see in exercise 1 that there are a lot of variables with long, nice descriptive names. Positive response, negative response, question 1, question 2, feedback, outcome 2A, outcome 2B, invalid outcome, user response 1, and right here, user response 2. That's a lot of variables. And the variables, just like in algebra, when you have like x equals 5 or y equals 10, these variables have certain values. Some of them are strings, which we know is pieces of text surrounded by double quotes. So positive response is currently equal to the letter y. The variable negative response is currently equal to the letter n, and so on. Okay, let's trace this code as it says here in the directions to predict what the output is. It doesn't really say that on this version of the worksheet. I think I'll fix that later. But anyway, right here, you should show me what prints out in the Python console window. Here it goes. Let's trace this code. Code always, in Python especially, code always executes from the top down. So we examine the first line of code, and positive response is equal to y. I'm going to make a little notation for that. I'm abbreviating because I don't have a lot of room. Positive response is currently equal to the letter y, and negative response is currently equal to the letter n because of that second line of code. So I've traced both of those lines of code. In other words, they're done. You don't have to scribble things out whenever you trace code. That's a little annoying anyway. But you might, you might want to just check mark the code that you've executed by putting nice little check marks here to make sure that you've satisfied whatever happens with those 2 lines of code. Okay, question 1 is all of this. I don't have the need nor the time nor the room here to jot that down over here. If I ever ask you to show your variables, you would have to show that scratch work. Right now, I'm allowing you to not show this variable, or this variable, or this one, or this one, or this one. They're all kind of long. Here's a dog, here's a cat, no cat or dog for you. This is the first interesting line of code. User response 1 equals input question 1. We've already studied this input command, but when there's something in the parentheses for input, question 1 does show up on the screen. So the user, the customer, will see the phrase like pets, question mark, yes or no. So when they see that on the screen as a question, they will be able to type something into the keyboard because of the way the input command works. And because of exercise 1's instructions, you're supposed to assume that the lowercase letter y is typed in at that moment. And because of the way Python works, that lowercase y will plug into the variable user response 1. So user response 1 will now be equal to the letter y because of the directions and because of the way Python works. So we're finished testing that line of code. And now we finally get to the most interesting part of this exercise, and that is the if statement. This whole chunk of code right here is one if statement, kind of like a train, with an engine car, if, and a caboose, the else. So because of that long if statement, we know that the way an if statement works is we always test the condition at the top. And the condition right now is to check, is user response 1, the variable user response 1, is the value y equal to positive response, which is PR, which is also y? Yes, it is. A lowercase y is equal to a lowercase y. Because of the way a double equals works, it simplifies to a true. And all of this just simplified to true because this y here does match that y. Because the if statement's condition is true at the top, we do indeed execute the code that's inside, indented inside the if section. We ignore the else, this else, because this else is the one that's lined up with this if. So I was technically incorrect a second ago when I circled something. This if, because of the green true, all of this code right here is executed next because it's inside with indentation, the if. Because this else is lined up perfectly with the I and if, this is now ignored in this exercise because of the way an if-else statement works overall. Remember, if-else statements, either the if works or the else works. It never plays out that both sections work. It just doesn't work that way. So this situation is not over yet. We have to trace more code. We have to now analyze everything in this green circle, which I will now erase to make it more easier to see if I can erase it, which right now I can't seem to erase it, so I'm not going to worry about it. Sorry about that. So now we're tracing code that's inside here, and user response 2 is equal to whatever the input is from question 2. Question 2 is now the question, need a best friend? So if the person types in this second y here, because we've already inputted that first y, the second y is plugging in for user response 2. I should make another variable there, listing for user response 2, which we just reviewed is currently also a lowercase y. And now we are finished with that line of code there that was indented. And now we see another if statement. Oh my, that would be an if statement inside of another if statement. Overall, we have an example here of nested if statements. This if else as a whole is inside the top part of this if else. So now the computer has no choice, but it must trace or execute the code that's in this if statement, the inner if statement. So we're checking to see if user response 2 currently, which is a y, is equal to, double equals, positive response. Yes, this y is the same or equal to that y. Because that is true, we now have a true there as an overall condition, simplified condition. And because that's true, we do indeed execute this print that I'm circling in yellow. And because that's an if-else as a whole here, we do not print this else print statement. This right here is what prints to the screen. Okay, we're one step away from being finished. We have to check out the variable feedback outcome 2a. Feedback outcome 2a. Let's look over the list of variables that we have up here. Here it is. Feedback outcome 2a is the phrase, here's a dog. And that, folks, is what prints. On the screen, because of the way this Python code executed, the phrase, "here's a dog," prints out. So I would like you to carefully print with a pencil, "here's a dog." Or if you're using a tool like Notability, you might be using a stylus or maybe even a text tool. That would be really nice. If you used a text tool like I'm using here, "here's a dog," with a capital H, apostrophe S. That's a weird font. I don't have time to change that font. I'm not sure if I can change that font in the software that I'm using, so I'm just going to leave the answer like that. There's the output. It does not print out, "here's a cat." That would have played out possibly with a no as one of these two inputs. Exercise number 2. It's the same code as this code. Trust me on that, because when I made the worksheet, I just copied and pasted. However, right here, we have a no instead of a yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, I'm sorry, that's not the difference. Forget I said that. On this chunk of code here, the difference is the user inputs a no as his or her second answer instead of a Y. So they're going to be answering a no for this input statement right here. And that's going to change what prints out. Good luck with that. It prints something other than "here's a dog." But trace the code. Don't just predict the output, because you never know when I might purposely put a logic error in my code so it doesn't actually make sense. Or I sometimes accidentally have typos on worksheets. Hopefully not, though. Exercise 3, it's the same code again. It's just that the user inputs 2 no's. And exercise 4, I think the user intended to type in 2 Y's. But the user, for some reason or another, types out the word yes here instead of simply a Y. And you should be able to predict what prints out in exercise 4, despite it being logical or not. You must act like a computer. You must execute code line by line, top down, looking exactly at what the person types in or to the computer. Or in the case of perhaps your grandfather, uncle, aunt, grandmother using an iPhone, if they type or touch the wrong thing, then their camera app does not open up because they did not follow the directions of the iPhone operating system. So while the prompt says to enter yes, Y, or N, this person's typing a yes, and you must tell me what prints out when you trace this code. Good luck with exercise 4, the whole worksheet actually, and see me or contact me if you have any further questions before the due date for this worksheet.